From Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Día de Colón, Día de los Pueblos Indígenas. Now, this day is celebrated on the second Monday of October. In this lesson, you will learn what is Columbus Day, what is Indigenous Peoples Day, chronological overview, right? So from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, Indigenous resistance at Thacker Pass, and stories of Indigenous women with a Indigenous resistance theme. So what is Columbus Day, right? It's a holiday that commemorates Christopher Columbus's landing in the Americas on October 12th, 1492. But we got to remember that he is a symbol of colonization or the action or process of settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area, particularly here where he landed in the Caribbean, right? In what's now Dominican Republic, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Cuba, right? He is a literal colonizer, right? A person who settled and explored, right, and established political control over the indigenous peoples of the area. He wreaked havoc in the lives of indigenous people there, especially the Taino. And so he is also a symbol of genocide. Now, what is genocide? Is the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Now that is defined, 1492 and onward in the Americas. Um, North, Central, and South Americas, the alternative term that we use from indigenous point of view is Abya. Um, and he is also a symbol of imperialism, right? Now, imperialism is a doctrine, a political strategy, a practice, a state policy, or advocacy that consists in extending power by territorial acquisition, or by extending political and economic control outward over other areas. Um, and so he is also a symbol of exploitation, right? The action or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work, the action of making use of and benefiting from resources, right? So when he went on this voyage, these four voyages, these four explorations, um, he was looking for treasure. He was looking for gold, right? And that was the ultimate goal to gain resources, to gain power, to gain money. And so, what is Indigenous Peoples Day? Now, when we talk about Indigenous Peoples Day, that's today. It gives us time to acknowledge the resilience and the strength of the 574 federally recognized and over 200 not recognized tribes in so-called United States. And when we take a look at this map, we take a look at uh, areas where there's a darker pink or darker color. Now, these areas are areas in which there are no tribes that are federally recognized. Um, and so it also gives us time to learn the significant impacts of US colonization has had on Native peoples. We have to remember that colonization has not stopped. Um, and so here we have a historical map showing um, the effects of colonization, and that's land theft, right? Or taking of indigenous lands this map shows from 1809 to 1891, right? When we talk about genocide, right, destroying a people, one of the main ones is land theft, right? And with that, there's also, um, placing indigenous peoples in reserves, in reservations, and also sending them to boarding schools to strip them of their culture and of their language, right? So land, language, cultures are stripped away from indigenous peoples, and it's still to this day. And it also provides the chance to celebrate the cultures and contributions of Native peoples in contemporary times. Because of colonization, this layer of colonization on our stolen lands, North, Central, and South Americas, or Abya Yala, there's a lot of invisibility of indigenous people. And so one of these contributors are Quana Chasing Horse. So let's take a look at their story.
Growing up the way I did and having a completely different lifestyle than I currently live right now, I definitely had a huge moment where it was like this completely different world.
For land protector, activist, and model Quana Chasing Horse, life shifts between the glitz and glamour of fashion runways to the sacred pathways of her indigenous roots.
I found that through my culture, through my practicing my traditions, and through my people. You know, that is what gives me purpose and makes me feel fulfilled, is my people, my passion and love for my people and the earth.
She's fourth generation of the Gwich'in Nation. Part of their mission is to fight for and protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
These fragile ecosystems are protected by Native American or Indigenous people. That alone just shows the much love and care that we have, whether it be for our community or for the earth. Because one thing that I was taught, and I feel like a lot of Indigenous people have this value, is, we do not see ourselves separate from nature, because we are nature.
Quana uses her platform to advocate for Indigenous sovereignty, climate justice, protecting lands and waters, and stopping violence against Native women.
Me and Onesh came here to fight not only for climate protection, but also fighting for our Arctic refuge, our animals. Defend the sacred! Defend the sacred!
It's an honor because as someone that now represents so much more than myself, I represent my people and I represent, a community that is so underrepresented. I want to make sure that I show up in the best way that I can, whether it be for advocacy or modeling or both, trying to make sure that I'm doing work in both fields and tying them together, because all these issues are so interconnected.
Quana's career as a fashion model has opened a door to bring her principles into the fashion world.
Not only am I one of the first Indigenous models, but one of the first, if not the first Indigenous model to carry traditional tattoos and grace them on the cover of a magazine. I'm given the space to be myself and to really represent my people in a way where I'm able to insert my values in my work, in modeling more specifically. And, especially if I'm given the platform and given the opportunity to help a brand or a designer or company or whoever really take the steps to, either be more sustainable or to be more inclusive or to really uplift those organizations who are doing frontlines work.
Quana was raised by a group of strong and courageous women, including her single mother. It was this upbringing that helped her find her voice.
I want to make my ancestors proud. I want to make my family proud. I want to make myself proud. And how I feel that is when I remember who I am and where I come from, and the generations of people that fought so hard for me to be here.
And so we get to the chronological overview, right? Year by year, some significant years that occurred in regards to Columbus Day. Now, the first time it was recorded that there was a celebration for him was in 1792, which is the 300th anniversary. And this happened in New York City. And again, he is a colonizer, he is a settler, right? We're celebrating a symbol of genocide, right? And in 1992, there was a one-time national holiday due to a lynching in New Orleans in which a mob hanged 11 Italian immigrants. Um, and then in October 12, 1937, by pressure of the Knights of Columbus, President Roosevelt made it a national holiday. Um, and so, as we see, this is Columbus is also a symbol for Italian Americans. And so in 1966, Mariano A. Luca founded a National Columbus Day Committee. And through that work, in 1968, Columbus Day became a federal holiday. Now in 72, President Nixon changed it to the second Monday of October. That's how it came to be, the second Monday of October. And in 1973, reporting the lands in one city, in one statue. There's many Christopher Columbus statues. And reporting the lands in what is Los Angeles, so-called Los Angeles, the traditional lands of the Tumba or Kizh Nation, in what is now Grand Park, right? Now, this was done without the consultation of indigenous peoples. And so we get to now the main events, like in 1977 and 1981. In 1977, Native Nations delegation proposed the concept of this day at the United Nations International Conference on Discrimination and against Indigenous Populations in the Americas, or the alternative term is Abya Yala, right? So this is already becoming, an awareness, right? An awareness on what has been done to indigenous peoples, not just in the Americas, but also think about it, around the world. And then 4 years later, there was the International Indigenous Peoples and the Land International Conference. Now, both of these events laid the groundwork for the draft of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples adopted on September 13th, 2007. So I do encourage you to look into that as well, right, to learn more. And so finishing off the 80s in 1989, South Dakota became the first state to recognize it. And so in 1992, we have Berkeley becomes the first city to recognize it, right? And then in 2017, Alaska and Oregon observed the day. And again, we're putting the lands in one city in 2018. It was the first Indigenous Peoples Day in so-called Los Angeles, traditional lands of the Tumba or Kizh Nation. And then we get to an event that occurred a month after. Remember that Columbus statue in LA? And so there was, through the decades, there was already a movement, right, to remove the statue. Because again, he is a symbol of genocide, exploitation. He is a symbol of imperialism, right? He's a symbol of colonization, right? And so this was the removal, right? There was it was open for the public. It was open for anyone to come and be together, right? It was a time of healing because he is a symbol of all of those terms, right? Of all of those atrocities that occurred have been occurring since he landed in the so-called Americas in 1492. Well, so he thought, right? He thought he landed in India. That's why, he called us Indios. Um, and so let's watch it, right? So we're going to watch it. There was different nations there. There were students, elders, people of all ages. And so let's watch it. And so I'm the one that recorded this video. You hear me say Shia, Shia, right? And that means leave, vete. And so we get to 2019, Indigenous Peoples Day in the so-called United States of America. 2019, New Mexico, Vermont, and Maine observed the day. President Biden proclaims its Indigenous Peoples Day on October 11th, 2021, on October 10th, 2022, and I'm sure also in 2023. 14 states recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, and more than 130 cities recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. That's through my research. And so we get to indigenous resistance at Thacker Pass. Now, Thacker Pass is in northern Nevada. I labeled this area here from Google Maps. You see Oregon, right? You see California, Nevada, Utah, and Idaho. And so Thacker Pass is in northern Nevada, close to the Oregon border. Now, what is happening here? What's happening is that lithium is being mined. And what is lithium, you might ask? Well, lithium is a natural resource from Mother Earth that is extracted to build solar panels and to also create electric cars. Now, when we're talking about solar panels and electric cars being seen as something good for Mother Earth, something good for the environment, we also have to think about what goes through that process, right? Because lithium is needed, lithium is mined, right? So the land is wrecked, right? And so that also creates air pollution and water pollution. And so when we talk about that area, right, Shoshone and Paiute tribes, we talk about an area that is sacred to them. We talk about an area where there was massacres that occurred there. So it's an area that's sacred to them because their ancestors are buried there, right? And again, Indigenous peoples, we are tied to the land, we are tied to our languages and our cultures. That's all part of it, right? And so there is a documentary that's available on YouTube. It's titled Thacker Pass, Mining the Sacred. Now, I also encourage you to watch this on your own. It's a 25-minute documentary, I believe. So let's watch the trailer.
So we're doing a story about Thacker Pass and Indigenous opposition to it.
And that's our ancestral homeland. That's our bones and our blood, deep, deep in that soil.
And us Native Americans been here since time immemorial. I mean, it's time for us to take our land back and go dig somewhere else.
We're still in the Indian Wars. I made that statement before too.
It's a cover-up. It's been a cover-up, and they're closing their eyes to it. This is not allegedly. This is not lying. I mean, come on.
Sobie IKEA spłacimy Nevada.
Civil something? Trespassing? And something about disobedience?
And I'm standing here because our ancestors are here. We gotta defend them. We gotta protect them. I'd give my life to protect this place.
And then this is where the missing and murdered Indigenous people come in. And you have to hire 1,000 men to build a lithium mine.
We've gone beyond where we can come back.
You cannot mine your way out of a climate crisis. You just can't do that. You can't destroy the earth to save the earth.
You feel the pain that's here.
And so we get to Indigenous stories through the eyes of women, resistance, Indigenous resistance stories. And so let's take a look at the first story, the Reindeer Queen.
She was known as the Reindeer Queen and one of the richest women in Alaska. So how did Shanrunak and Tusarluk use her remarkable wealth to benefit the Inupiaq community? Born just 3 years after the United States bought Alaska from Russia, the daughter of a Russian trader and Inupiaq mother, Shanrunak grew up in St. Michael, a busy trading post. In 1889, she married Charlie and Tusarluk, an Inupiaq trader, and moved to Cape Nome. There, they met two Americans, Captain Michael A. Healy and government official Sheldon Jackson, who did not understand the Inupiaq lifestyle. They believed that the Inupiaq had an overall reliance on whales as a food source, and decided to import reindeer from Siberia to supplement their diets. Shanrunak traveled with them as a translator, helping to broker deals between Russian reindeer herders and American government officials. On their return, Shanrunak and her husband worked at a reindeer station near Teller, Alaska for the U.S. government. As payment, they received 500 reindeer and became the first Indigenous Alaskans to own a herd. In 1900, Charlie died of measles. According to Inupiaq tradition, the herd would normally have passed to his brothers, but Shanrunak was able to use American laws to her advantage and inherited the reindeer herself. She worked hard to expand her herd, successfully selling reindeer meat to local businesses and the U.S. Army. As a result, she became one of the wealthiest women in Alaska. Still, Shanrunak faced many challenges. Many white American settlers discriminated against the Inupiaq people. After moving to Unalakleet in 1901, Shanrunak was robbed by an American man who stole her money and sold 80 of her reindeer. The man denied stealing the reindeer and claimed Shanrunak owed him money, but Shanrunak was determined to hang onto her fortune, took the case to court, and won. She used her wealth to provide food and shelter for the Inupiaq community, and adopted 11 children and taught them to care for reindeer and follow the Inupiaq traditions. Shanrunak died in 1848, but her legacy as the Reindeer Queen lives on. What other women in history bridged different cultures to help their communities?
And so we have discussion questions, right? How did raising the reindeer make her the richest woman on the Seward Peninsula, right? How did she give back to her community, right? These are questions that you can ask, right? If you're a teacher, you can ask, you present this story or these stories, and then we're gonna watch more and have a discussion. Have a discussion with your students. And you can pause, right? And then have this discussion with your students. Let's take a look at another story.
At a time when Apache men and women followed gender roles, Lozin defied convention to become one of the finest warriors in the tribe's history. Born near Ojo Caliente around 1840, Lozin was a member of the Warm Springs Apache, led by her warrior father. As a child, she learned how to ride a horse, becoming one of the finest riders in her band. Then began the intense physical training that all Apache girls were expected to undertake, such as waking at dawn and running up a mountain, as well as traditional domestic tasks that would prepare them for motherhood. But during her coming-of-age ceremony, when she was 12, Lozin received a spiritual calling to become a warrior. Soon, she was one of the finest trackers in her tribe and was believed to have supernatural powers to locate enemies. However, in the 1870s, her life was turned upside down when the Apache were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands to a reservation far away. En route, many suffered from hunger and disease. But during the journey, Lozin stood out for her bravery and empathy. One day, she helped a group of women and children cross a river to escape from American soldiers. Then, she risked her life to save a pregnant woman, stealing horses to evade their captor, and even helping to deliver and care for the baby. When she rejoined her tribe, she was devastated to learn they had been attacked, this time by Mexican soldiers. Many had been killed, including her brother, the tribal leader. So she traveled to the San Carlos Reservation to join forces with other Apache bands and defend themselves against attack. Lozin and another female warrior, Tadatsi, tried to initiate peace negotiations. But when the Apache surrendered in 1886, Lozin was taken prisoner. She died of tuberculosis at Mount Vernon Barracks in Alabama in 1889. Why is it important to tell the stories of women who defied gender norms?
Again, some discussion questions, right? How did Lozin learn to become a powerful warrior and strategist? Why have our history books left out the stories of the Apache women warriors? These are questions that you can have with other folks as well if you're presenting this lesson to other people, community members, or your students, right? So later on, you can pause it and you can have this discussion. Now let's take a look at the final story.
At the turn of the 20th century, the U.S. government forced Native Americans to assimilate into Anglo-American culture. But Gertrude Simmons Bonin, aka Sitka Lhasa, an activist, author, and educator, fought against the Americanization of Native nations. Sitka Lhasa spent her early childhood on the Yankton Indian Reservation in South Dakota. But when she was 8, began attending a boarding school run by American missionaries. At a time when the U.S. government restricted access to work and education for Native American people, attending a boarding school hundreds of miles away from home was one of the few ways that Sitka Lhasa could receive an education. But these government-funded schools could be traumatic environments for the students, a culture shock at a formative age. When Sitka Lhasa arrived at her school, the teachers brutally cut her long hair and gave her an uncomfortable school uniform. She and her fellow students were only allowed to speak English. Sitka Lhasa felt the teachers treated students more like animals than people. When the school allowed her to go back home, she felt alienated from her family and community. After years of forced assimilation, she no longer felt she belonged anywhere. Sitka Lhasa left again and went to study music and teaching. She got a job at the Carlisle School, a boarding school like the one she had attended, but soon realized she was contributing to a system designed to destroy her own people's culture. Zitkalasa left the boarding school and started teaching at a school on a Ute reservation, where students could remain with their families. Zitkalasa also used her love of writing to connect more Americans to Sioux culture. Under her pen name, which means Red Bird, she published short stories, essays, articles, and even an opera that were based on Sioux customs and her personal experiences. She went on to become an activist in Washington, D.C., helping shape policies and laws that countered assimilation tactics and recognized Native Americans' U.S. citizenship. Zitkalasa channeled her experiences as a boarding school student and teacher into the fight against Americanization. Through her teaching, writing, and organizing, she helped make Indigenous peoples' voices heard and their cultures valued.
And again, these discussion questions, right? These are questions that you can also answer yourself, or with other people, with your students, right? So in 1962, Tzikalasa was a co-founder of the National Council of American Indians, now known as the National Congress of American Indians. What did she and the organization lobby for, right? And then the other question is, how did her experience as a child at a Quaker missionary run boarding school shape her life's work, right? These are good questions to have, and especially around this time, right? Um, and so that is the lesson. I hope that you all learned something and also encourage you to continue learning. Bueno, timoitase.